What happens when two of the most outspoken women in media sit across from each other and the cameras start rolling? What you're about to hear will shock you. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral out of control when egos clash and old wounds get reopened. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below because this story has layers that will keep you thinking long after the video ends. The studio lights were blazing hot that Tuesday morning as the production team made their final adjustments. The View's iconic table sat center stage, coffee mugs strategically placed, notes carefully arranged. But there was something different in the air today, a tension that even the seasoned crew members could feel. Whispers had been circulating for weeks about this particular guest appearance. And now the moment had finally arrived. Whoopi Goldberg settled into her familiar chair, adjusting her signature glasses as she reviewed her notes one final time. As the show's moderator and most senior host, she had conducted thousands of interviews, faced down politicians, celebrities, and controversial figures with equal measure. But today felt different. Today felt personal. The guest entrance was always a moment of anticipation. But when Meghan Markle walked onto the set, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Dressed in an elegant navy blazer that commanded attention without being flashy, she moved with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to navigate hostile territory. Her smile was perfectly crafted, the kind that had been honed through years of royal protocol and media training. "Welcome to The View," Whoopi began, her voice carrying that familiar, authoritative tone that had made her a household name. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and I have to say, there's been quite a bit of chatter about your recent projects and, well, let's call them revelations." Meghan's smile never wavered, but those watching closely might have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. "Thank you for having me, Whoopi. I'm always excited to have real conversations about the work that matters to me." "Real conversations," Whoopi repeated, leaning back in her chair with a look that seasoned viewers knew meant trouble was brewing. "That's interesting, because I've been wondering lately about what constitutes real versus, shall we say, carefully constructed narratives." The other hosts exchanged glances, recognizing the subtle shift in Whoopi's demeanor. This wasn't going to be the typical promotional interview they had expected. Meghan's posture straightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure I follow your meaning." "Oh, I think you do," Whoopi continued, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. "See, I've been in this business for a long time, longer than most people remember. I've seen careers built on authenticity, and I've seen careers built on something else entirely. The question is, which category do you fall into?" The studio audience, usually quick to react, had gone unusually quiet. Even the producers in the control room could sense that this interview was veering into uncharted territory. "I've always tried to be authentic in everything I do," Meghan replied, her voice steady, but with an edge creeping in. "Whether that's in my acting, my humanitarian work, or my personal life choices." "Humanitarian work," Whoopi nodded slowly. "Let's talk about that, 'cause I'm curious about this new foundation of yours, this initiative that's supposedly helping women find their voices. It's interesting timing, don't you think? Right when your own voice seems to be the loudest in every room you enter." Meghan's carefully maintained composure flickered for just a moment. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but my work with women's empowerment has been a passion of mine for years, long before I met my husband." "Your husband," Whoopi's voice took on a sharper tone. "The prince who gave up his birthright for love. That's the story we're all supposed to believe, right? The fairy tale romance that conquered all obstacles. But here's what I'm wondering. And forgive me if this sounds cynical, but I've been around long enough to recognize a calculated move when I see one." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Camera operators adjusted their angles, sensing that they were capturing something significant. The other hosts seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out. "I married my husband because I love him," Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. Everything else that followed was a consequence of that choice, not the motivation. For it, love, Whoopi mused, as if tasting the word. That's beautiful. Really touching. But let's be real here for a minute. You're a smart woman, college-educated, had a decent career going. Are you really going to sit there and tell me that when you met a prince, a literal prince, that somewhere in the back of your mind you weren't calculating the possibilities? Meghan's hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, now gripped the armrests of her chair. That's an incredibly offensive assumption to make about someone you don't know. "But I do know you," Whoopi shot back, leaning forward. "Or at least, I know your type. I've been watching women like you my entire career. Women who see an opportunity and seize it, regardless of the consequences for everyone else involved. The question is whether you're honest enough to admit it. Women like me." Meghan's voice was sharp now, the careful media training beginning to crack. "What exactly does that mean?" Whoopi's smile was cold, smart, ambitious, willing to do whatever it takes to secure their position. There's nothing wrong with ambition, don't get me wrong. But there's something distasteful about wrapping it up in victimhood and selling it as empowerment. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's breathing had become more visible, her chest rising and falling with the effort of maintaining control. The studio lights seemed brighter, hotter, as if they were illuminating every crack in her armor. "You don't know anything about my struggles," Meghan said, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "You don't know what it was like to be isolated, to have my mental health ignored, to feel like I had nowhere to turn." "Mental health," Whoopi repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. Another buzzword that's very popular these days. Very sympathetic. "But here's what I want to know. What was your mental health like when you were actively courting the media? Attention. When you were posing for those carefully staged paparazzi shots? When you were playing the game by your rules?" Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this character assassination. Sit down," Whoopi commanded, her voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "We're not done here." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Meghan remained standing, her hands trembling slightly as she stared down at Whoopi, who sat unmoved in her chair like a judge delivering a verdict. The other hosts looked between them, paralyzed by the intensity of the moment. "I said, sit down," Whoopi repeated, her voice lower now, but somehow more menacing. "Because if you walk away from this table, you're proving every single thing I just said about you." Meghan's jaw clenched, but she slowly lowered herself back into the chair. When she spoke, her voice was barely controlled. "You want to talk about character assassination? Let's talk about what you're doing right now, on national television." To someone who came here in good faith, Whoopi laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Honey, please. You came here because your publicist told you it would be good for your image. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was some altruistic gesture." "Everything I do gets twisted," Meghan said, her composure finally starting to crack. "I can't win. If I stay quiet, I'm accused of being calculating. If I speak up, I'm accused of playing victim. What exactly do you want from me?" "I want honesty," Whoopi snapped. "Just once, I want to hear someone in your position tell the truth instead of hiding behind carefully crafted talking points and victim narratives. You want honesty." Meghan's voice rose, causing several audience members to shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Fine. You want to know what it's really like. It's like being in a prison where everyone can see you, but no one wants to actually help you. It's like drowning while people debate whether you deserve to be saved." "Oh, please." Whoopi rolled her eyes dramatically. "You married into one of the most privileged families on the planet. You had access to resources most people can't even dream of. Don't sit there and tell me you were drowning. Money doesn't cure loneliness, Meghan shot back. Title doesn't cure depression, and privilege doesn't protect you from racism. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Whoopi's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing as she leaned forward. "There it is," she said quietly. "I was wondering when you'd play that card." "Card?" Meghan's voice cracked with disbelief. "You think racism is a card I play?" "I think it's a very convenient explanation for a lot of uncomfortable situations," Whoopi replied coolly. "I've been black in America a lot longer than you have, sweetheart. I know the difference between actual racism and people just not liking you for who you are." The audience gasped audibly. Even the camera operators seemed to flinch at the brutality of the statement. Meghan's face went pale, then flushed red. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "How dare you diminish my experience because it doesn't fit your narrative, your experience?" Whoopi's voice rose now, matching Meghan's intensity. "Let me tell you about experience. I've been fighting for respect in this industry since before you were born. I've been called every name. In the book, passed over for roles, had my intelligence questioned, my appearance mocked. But I never, not once, used it as an excuse to tear down the very institutions that gave me opportunities." "I didn't tear down anything," Meghan protested. "I tried to change things from the inside." "You tried to change things." Whoopi's laugh was harsh. "You ran away the moment things got difficult. You took your ball and went home, but not before making sure everyone knew how badly you'd been treated." "I left because I was being destroyed," Meghan said, her voice breaking. "Because staying would have killed me." "Destroyed?" Whoopi's voice dripped with contempt. "You want to know what destroyed looks like? Destroyed is being blacklisted for speaking out. Destroyed is having your career ended because you refused to play along. You weren't destroyed, you were inconvenienced." Tears were forming in Meghan's eyes now, but she fought to keep them from falling. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Whoopi continued relentlessly. "I know what it looks like when someone confuses being challenged with being victimized. I know what it looks like when someone mistakes accountability for persecution." "Stop," Meghan whispered, but Whoopi wasn't finished. "You want to be seen as this champion of women's rights, this voice for the voiceless, but what you really are is someone who couldn't handle the heat when the kitchen got too hot. And instead of admitting that, you've spent years crafting this narrative that makes you the hero of your own story." "That's not true," Meghan said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "Isn't it?" Whoopi pressed. "Tell me one thing, just one thing you've done since leaving the royal family that wasn't ultimately about serving your own interests. One project, one initiative, one statement that wasn't designed to rehabilitate your image or advance your career." Meghan opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. "That's what I thought," Whoopi said quietly. "You see, the difference between us is that I've earned my voice through decades of work, of taking risks, of facing consequences. You've been given platforms and opportunities that most people would kill for, and you've used them primarily to complain about how unfair life has been to you." "I've tried to help people," Meghan said weakly. "Have you?" Whoopi's voice was sharp. "Again, or have you tried to help yourself while making it look like you're helping people? Because there's a difference, and I think you know it." The tears that Meghan had been fighting finally spilled over, rolling down her cheeks in silent tracks. She wiped them away quickly, but not before the cameras caught every moment. "You're enjoying this," she accused, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not enjoying anything," Whoopi replied. "I'm doing what nobody else has had the courage to do. I'm holding you accountable for the choices you've made and the narratives you've pushed, by humiliating me on television, by asking you to be honest about who you really are instead of who you want people to think you are. Meghan stood up again, more slowly this time. I don't have to take this abuse. Abuse? Whoopi's eyebrows shot up. This is abuse. Having your actions questioned is abuse. Being asked to defend your choices is abuse. You really don't understand what that word means, do you? The question hit like a physical blow. Meghan swayed slightly, gripping the back of her chair for support. You know what the real tragedy is here? Whoopi continued, her voice taking on an almost philosophical tone as Meghan struggled to compose herself. You had everything. You had a platform that billions of people could only dream of. You had the chance to make real change, to be a bridge between worlds, to use your position for something bigger than yourself. Meghan's tears were flowing freely now, but she lifted her chin defiantly. I tried to do that. No, Whoopi said firmly. You tried to remake an ancient institution in your image instead of learning how to work within it. You tried to change the rules instead of mastering the game, and when that didn't work, you burned it all down and called it liberation. Maybe some institutions deserve to burn. Meghan shot back through her tears. Maybe they do, Whoopi agreed, surprising everyone. But you don't get to be the one to light the match and then claim you were forced to do it. You don't get to be both the arsonist and the victim. The other hosts finally found their voices. Whoopi, one of them interjected gently. Maybe we should know. Whoopi cut her off without taking her eyes off Meghan. We're going to finish this conversation because this is bigger than just her. This is about accountability. This is about the difference between actual courage and performance courage. Performance courage. Meghan's voice was raw now, stripped of all pretense. That's right, Whoopi nodded. Real courage is staying and fighting when things get hard. Real courage is admitting when you're wrong. Real courage is putting the cause before yourself, even when it costs you something. What you did was performance courage. All the drama, all the interviews, all the carefully orchestrated reveals. It looked brave from the outside, but it was really just self-preservation dressed up as heroism. Meghan was shaking now, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. You're wrong about me. Am I? Whoopi leaned back, studying her carefully. Then explain to me why every single thing you've done since leaving has been about clearing your name. Telling your side of the story, getting your version of events on the record. If you were really about service, about helping others, wouldn't you have just quietly done the work? I had to defend myself, Meghan whispered. From what? From criticism? From disagreement? From people not automatically accepting your version of events. Whoopi's voice was relentless. You had to defend yourself from the normal human experience of being questioned and judged. It wasn't normal, Meghan protested. The scrutiny was impossible. The scrutiny was part of the job, Whoopi replied sharply. The job you signed up for when you married into that family. The job you benefited from when it served your purposes. You can't cherry-pick the parts of fame and privilege that work for you and then cry foul when the other parts become inconvenient. Meghan buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. When she looked up, her makeup was smeared, her carefully constructed image completely shattered. Why are you doing this to me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because someone needs to, Whoopi replied without a trace of sympathy. Because you've been surrounded by people who tell you what you want to hear for too long. Because the truth matters, even when it's uncomfortable. The truth. Meghan laughed bitterly through her tears. You want the truth? The truth is that I was 19 when I decided I wanted to be famous. The truth is that I saw what celebrity could do, how it could open doors, how it could give you power. The truth is that when I met Harry, part of me, a part I'm not proud of, saw an opportunity. The studio fell completely silent. Even Whoopi seemed taken aback by the raw honesty of the admission. "But that's not the whole truth," Meghan continued, her voice growing stronger. "The whole truth is that I fell in love with him anyway. The whole truth is that I didn't know what I was signing up for. The whole truth is that I was in over my head from day one, and I was too proud to admit it. Now we're getting somewhere," Whoopi said quietly. "The whole truth is that I made mistakes," Meghan went on, the words pouring out now like water from a broken dam. "I pushed too hard, too fast. I wanted to change everything at once instead of learning how things worked first. I wanted to be the star of my own story instead of a supporting character in someone else's." And Whoopi prompted. "And I was scared," Meghan admitted, her voice breaking again. "I was scared of failing, scared of being exposed as not good enough, scared of admitting that maybe I wasn't ready for what I thought I wanted." "So you ran," Whoopi stated simply. "So I ran," Meghan confirmed. "And then I spent years trying to justify it, trying to make it look like the brave choice instead of the scared choice." The silence that followed was different from the tense quiet that had characterized the rest of the interview. This was the silence of a truth finally being acknowledged. "Do you know what the saddest part is?" Whoopi asked, her voice softer now, but still cutting. "You could have been extraordinary. You had everything it takes to be a real force for change. But you got in your own way." "I know," Meghan whispered. "Do you?" Whoopi pressed. "Because knowing and understanding are two different things. Understanding means accepting that you can't undo the choices you've made. Understanding means stopping the victim tour and starting the accountability tour." Meghan looked up at her, eyes red and swollen. "What if it's too late?" "It's never too late to start telling the truth," Whoopi replied. "But it has to be the real truth, not another carefully crafted narrative designed to rehabilitate your image. It has to be the messy, uncomfortable, unflattering truth." "I don't know if I'm brave enough for that," Meghan admitted. "Then you're not brave enough to be the person you claim to be," Whoopi said simply. "And that's the real tragedy here. Not what happened to you, but what you've chosen to do with what happened to you." Meghan stood up one final time, her movements slow and deliberate. She looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the audience, at the other hosts who had watched this brutal dissection in stunned silence. "I need to go," she said quietly. "You always do," Whoopi replied. "But maybe someday you'll stay long enough to have the conversation that actually matters." Meghan walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the studio floor. Just before she reached the door, she turned back. "You're right about me," she said, her voice clear despite the tears. "About most of it, anyway. I just don't know what to do with that." "Start there," Whoopi said. "Start with admitting it to yourself, not just to me." And with that, Meghan was gone, leaving behind a studio full of people trying to process what they had just witnessed. So what do you think? Was Whoopi too harsh, or was this the wake-up call that needed to happen? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more content that digs deeper than the surface. I want to know, do you think people in positions of power should be held to different standards, or do the same rules apply to everyone?